Okay, before the break, we were talking about some technical terms for data, databases, and um, how we make use of that hardware we were taking apart last week. The stuff we want for that, filling that ancient need of that flow from data into information, into knowledge, into wisdom. That's going to show up quite a bit here. We get up away from the binary stuff like we talked about on Tuesday into the more complex levels where humans can work at, and layer and layer of layer complexity on that, more and more organization put onto it. And there's a couple assignments this week that relate to things. One of them is that a relational database, like we were talking about before the semester. It's a small one. It's part of the Office suite. Most of the Office suites have something like that in it, or not most of them. Microsoft Office and LibreOffice have that. Google Office doesn't really have it. They have other things online to use that are completely separate from their Office suite. And the Mac Office suite doesn't really have a good database to work with. They have other software that can be used for that. But it's a small, fully self-contained database. There's a few differences, a little different than working with things. It has step-by-step labs. We have that and a spreadsheet. Let's go ahead and look at maybe access first. That one has step-by-step instructions. I think I have access on this machine. Okay. I don't think I have a license with that particular email, but so right off the bat, you'll notice that it's not like word processor or PowerPoint or spreadsheets, which we're going to look at here in just a moment. Those open up to the file and we immediately start doing work. This one the database opens up to the save menu. That goes back to that thing we were talking about earlier. Working on a database is entirely working in storage, long-term storage over in the hard drive, not on the RAM chip, not in memory. So we have to go ahead and set the stuff up in storage first. And real quick, I want to point out, you'll notice that like most of the rest of the Office suite, there is a lot of templates to begin with. So there's step-by-step instructions, but to kind of familiarize yourself with this, that's kind of my recommendation. I have a similar recommendation for Excel is use one of the templates to kind of see what you have to work with going on there. So maybe, what do we have? Home inventory. Let's see what's that. So we open up something with that template. Okay, good. I do have it now. So you can see we have those columns like we talked about, filling out that nice grid of a table. There's an ID. So an important thing for databases is every single record has to be unique in some way. And for certain things, it'd be hard to find a unique spot. Like if we have a bunch of names, and there's a good number of people in there, a good number of Americans in there, there's a good chance we're going to have a whole bunch of John Smiths in there, right? It wouldn't be unique enough. So we give each one a unique, we need to make sure there's a unique identifier. So by default, that just sets up where everything gets its own unique ID, the item we're storing, the condition it's in. Notice we have a short list of condition, the date when it was there. Our only options for input are to pick a certain date. It would give us an error if we tried to type something else in there. That'll be a big difference in spreadsheet, the location. So just keeping track of everything in the house. Are there other tables here? Home inventory list. And then that's going to connect over to this other one, which they adjusted it so that it doesn't look like that raw table. The boring part started to put it into a form. Not a very good form, but a little bit more interesting than the rows and columns and that big grid, which is just an appearance, another layer of complexity on there, where we can add like a picture about it, where it came from, how much it's insured for, all of that stuff, and keep track of things, and then they are connected together. Yeah, so like this category column should be the same one. Yeah, so if we look at those categories, and then those categories are together, so then those tables, much like that picture of the guy who raced it, there's relationships between those tables connecting them together. On what category they're in, serial number seems like it would make a better unique identifier, but there's those different templates, and then we can, from those templates, we can generate reports. There's nothing in here, so the report is just a blank page. You make it look nice as it prints out or feeds into a slide deck for a presentation and all that stuff. Pre-made charts and graphs for when the table's filled up. We know what goes into the table, so we know how those columns from the table are going to relate to the chart. We just can't draw the lines on the chart yet. But we can set everything up so that it's ready to go. So there's a lot of templates like that that can be useful for getting started. What other templates were there? Student template, that's probably a good example. Nutrition tracker. Student data is a typical example. It's very straightforward and fits very nicely in the database. So they're good examples, but we have a bunch of different tables here. Earning settings, attendance, student, and likewise, the tables are have all those relationships going on. And this has some pre-made queries where we can ask questions about it. Go to side view. So we look at this table and this one just puts them in alphabetical order. Student attendance exceeded. So some like pre-made queries where the student name, adjust that to alphabetical order. In attendance, I was expecting some sort of criteria here, like greater than 4. If they had more than 4 absences, we can filter down that data in storage instead of having to bring it into RAM and go through the processor to do all the filter. So great way to learn those sort of things is the templates. That's always my recommendation. We'll just go to a blank one. Oh, no, oh, that close those templates. Yeah, apparently closed all the other templates. So one other thing that's important to note, I was going to point out it on the templates. There was a whole bunch of things over here. This big list down the side, which would be a tree view like the table. Unlike the other Office software you might be used to, Access is not a file per se. Access is a collection of files, and all those files are filled with data. So we view it in one place, so it seems like we're looking at a file, one file, but it is spread out. So we have this big grid. There's step-by-step instructions. We need to say specifically what we have, so maybe we have a name. Somebody's name would be short text. So short text, call that name. So I shouldn't use name because that's a keyword the language knows, but I'm just going to ignore that because I know it'll be fine. Name, age, and the town they live in, which would also be text. So we set up what our columns are like, and then we can come through and start entering the data. Right, we have these columns set up. That'll be enough for a quick example here. So like maybe there's a Sally who's 33, Salem, and a Charlie who's 18 from Charlestown. Helen, who's 54 from New Albany. Jeff, who's 23 from Jeffersonville. And then we so that gets our data. I'll go ahead and save that as people. And it's not just a view thing. When we get over to Excel in a moment, it is just text in Excel. We're just looking at a whole bunch of text. But this is more than text. That's why we had to specifically say this one is text, and this one's an integer, and this third one's going to be text. And then that first one's an integer as well. So we have a couple of integers, and we have to be specific about what it is so the computer can find it. Those all have specific sizes to them, a certain amount of data, a certain amount of space is reserved for those columns over in the hard drive. It's not just an appearance thing. But now that we have some data, that's what you're going to do. For the lab assignment, you're going to set up a couple tables, fill in the columns, and you'll form the connection between them that has step-by-step instructions like the rest of those labs with a bunch of pictures. Then we can ask questions about it. So I'm just going to come up. One thing I would suggest is these are all separate files. So you want to be careful not to try and work on multiple files at the same time or to make sure everything's closed. So it can be really good form to close the tabs, and that way you make sure everything's saved before you move on to something else. Oh, and up here's what I kept pointing out. There's an undo button up here in the corner. Can't really see it on the screen there. Behind my mouse, there is the normal undo button. If I ever leave the mouse there, the little pop-up text shows. Undo doesn't really do anything. Like when we're typing in this type of table, if I typed like SALY there and made a typo, undo would take the Y away. But by the time if I go to the next cell, then it can't get back there and undo it. The only way to do it is go in and replace it, save something else at that spot on the hard drive. So there's an undo button, but all it'll really undo is the last letter that you typed in, as long as you haven't gone to the next cell. Because when you go to the next cell, it actually puts it on hard drive. Oops. So if we go to, now that we have some data in there, we go to create. We can create tables. We got one of those. Queries are where we ask questions. Forms are just to make it look nicer. So I could build a form off this. So like form, I'll just click form. It created one off there. In the long run, taking a little bit of time to design that, it can make a form that looks a lot better than that grid of the table. The forms are because nobody wants to sit and work with a big grid of words and numbers. So we make it look really nice or match a paper form. Like the IRS, the databases, IRS agents putting all tax data into the database. They have a form that really ties directly to the table in the background, kind of like what's going on here, only on a much bigger scale. Only the thing on their screen looks exactly like those paper forms everybody fills out. Well, I call them paper forms. They're on computer screens, but some people might still print them out. I guess that hasn't completely disappeared from the world. So forms are to make it look nice. And notice I had it selected over here, and then just click the form button, and it automatically knew that I wanted a form related to that table. If you have multiple tables, you might have to choose which one goes with which. It's also some nice wizards. And then reports at the end. I'll do a report off a query. So a query is where we'll ask questions of it. So you see over here on the right, it's behind the thing. Let me move the. Whoops. I don't need to see those. I'll move those over to the other screen. I'm sorry. Usually I duplicate the screen, but the way this is set up, I can't duplicate it for some reason. Or it's already set to duplicate the screen. So for some reason it says it's one screen. So instead of an extended screen, like screen 1 and screen 2, somebody actually set it up so that it is screen one, but it's really, really wide screen, one screen computer. But I don't need those on the screen. So over here, we can add the tables we're going to search through. We can have multiple ones. I guess I can make another table real quick. Now we want to be kind of quick here. We make multiple tables, connect them together. There's a lot of that coming. Most everybody has to take the DBMS 110 class. That's I think there's one program that dropped it recently, and they're going to bring it back. So that's one of this class, Informatics 109, SF 120, and DBMS 110 are the 3 classes that everybody in School of IT has to take basically. So you'll have more details for that about this stuff later. Access has a nice GUI to work with. Maybe we want to know the names of people who are under 25. I should watch my screen so that instead of the one that's delayed a second and a half behind. So bring down the name and age. So notice the fields we're looking at. We can sort it. We can choose whether or not to show it. So I'm going to not show the age because I know everybody on here is going to be under 25. And then the row below that is criteria. And actually all the rows below that on this grid are criteria. So I can come over here and say less than or equal to 25. So if age is less than or equal to 25, then I'm going to go ahead and click somewhere else just to make sure that that goes into that cell like it's supposed to. If the age is less than or equal to 25, then show the name. So we have that checkbox of whether we even want to see it. But we kind of know that. And then up here in the top left is this button that says run, which run the query is ask that question. So we ask that and we get 2 names back. So it kind of filters through our data set very quickly. Then I can save that. Under 25. What's something that happens around 25? 27 would have been better. That I could give it a neat name like the tibia solidifies. I was trying to come up with something unique about 25, but 25 is just an age. You're going with 21, but that can save that, and it's almost like a new table now. We can get back in there, go back to the design view, maybe turn the age field back on if we actually want to see it. Do all those edits. I'll run that with just the names. And there's also, you'll see on this list, the SQL view, SQL view. We can see the code itself. So if you're heading down a pathway where you're going to need to learn SQL, it's a good place to you drag your stuff around and then it'll write the code. So you can see what that code looks like. So it's very human readable, definitely made by Americans. Very readable for Americans. But select name from our people table where age is less than 25. So it kind of follows the structure of English sentences, but used with a very small number of keywords. But it can be useful for that. Oh, and then the final thing, I'm not sure what I changed. I was trying to do that without changing anything. I'm turning the age back on. Maybe we'll see those just for the last part. Run that. And the final thing is we want to, so that question, that fits in our flow, right? The data is the table itself, the raw facts. Information is when that data becomes useful. So maybe there's a reason why we would ask that question. Who are the people in the database under 25? It's starting to turn towards information. Really, we want some decision-making abilities from it. So I'm going to take that query, again, under the create table. The last section over here is reports. So I can just click here and again, the default's very, very basic. but we can generate a report, and you'll notice the little dash lines, and you can probably tell by glancing that that's the size that's going to come out of a printer. The report you would print out and hand to everybody at a meeting for whatever's going on with it, little notes, add graphs and stuff, but make it look, that's where we make it look nice. So there's all those different stages. We have, did I save the form? Yes, save that under 25. I thought I saved that form as well. So let me create the form. Yes, save. Yeah. So we have a people form, which is good for working with, and if we go to the end, then we can add somebody else to there, add a new record. Mary, who's 28 from Marysville. And we can add stuff to our table from the form. So this is our actual data. But then we can filter that down with a query and sort of apply some context. So then we can begin to apply it by putting in a really nice report with charts and graphs and all that fancy stuff that we show off to the management and make decisions off what's in the database. So those are the big 4 parts. I think I asked you to do like at least one. We probably didn't do forms because laying out forms and access is harder than it needs to be. Graphic software has come a long way since they initially designed that, but nobody has ever come back and edited it. So laying out the forms is harder than it needs to be, but that's the basic parts of it. And I would highly recommend a little bit of extra practice with that if you want to. Oh, and one other thing. Like I said, good practice would probably be go to one of the templates. Like there was a nutrition tracking template and different things, event management template, and look for one that you would be familiar with and get a little bit of practice. It is a big deal, right? If you're a data analytics person, it's obvious that's the main thing. Software developers, you're automating the processes, automating the processing of data. So you need to know how to work with data. Cybersecurity people, that's what you're protecting. So you should probably be familiar with how it's set up so that you can watch for vulnerabilities, because there are some big ones. But it applies to everybody in every field of IT. Network infrastructure people, that's what you're transmitting across. That's what you're transmitting across those lines. So one to get some practice with, but you'll notice there's no save button, right? All the way along the way. In the rest of our office, there's a save button at the end, but along the way I was saving because those are all separate files. So that's a big change from the rest of the Office suite, is Access is working in multiple files at once. What there is, where they talk about, so I collapsed the new. Oh, that's just showing the new stuff. Down under options. Yep. We still have those same options. Like, did we see customizing the ribbon? Talking about Word? I don't think we did we? Oh, and anywhere in Office, if you go to like customize the ribbon, you can make new tabs and add buttons to the tabs. Well, you have to make a new tab and put a group in it, and then you can add buttons to the group. So if you have trouble finding one, you can just go to the list of everything and put them there all at once. So let me do that. So, well, it says I moved the Zoom stuff out of my way again. Okay. So I'll create a new tab here. And give it a name. So this is, I'll call it the Informatics tab. And there has to be a group in there. The group is this little segments along the ribbon. We can just grab a button and add that to that group and delete and font color. whatever buttons we want. And we hit OK. Notice we now have that new tab with just the buttons we use whatsoever. That is fully customizable. You can even get to the ones that came there and adjust it. So if you, by the very nature of a job, there's usually a lot of repetitive tasks, right? You're gonna find yourself using the same buttons over and over and over again. So it's nice to be able to customize it. So we have that. I don't see the button I was looking for. Maybe they automated it in the latest version. They were trying to automate it in the previous version, so they kind of hit the button. But instead of save at the end, we have compress and repair, which gets rid of all the empty spaces we had along the way. So for example, when we said name's going to be short text, those names are pretty short, but if I switch to this view right here, we see there's actually 255 characters there. So there's a lot of empty space, and none of those names came even close to 255 characters long. So there's a lot of wasted space all the way through that table. So we want to get rid of all that wasted space. But saving happens along the way. So that step-by-step lab will get you some starts there, some starts into that stuff. It doesn't go too far. Let me open this real quick. Maybe. Okay, good. So here's a much bigger database. For a MySQL database, I guess I need to create a new one. Create one called Informatics class. That seems like a good name. Create that. And there's GUIs here. Unlike Access, which is a small version, or base if you use LibreOffice Suite, the LibreOffice Office Suite, those have small versions. They're good for a few hundred to a couple thousand customers. A typical small business size. You wouldn't want to do it for something with millions of data points. So MySQL is a very common one dealing with that here. Has a lot more functionality, which means makes for a lot more buttons to work with. So the GUI is kind of confusing, but this is where typically it would be done right with the code. So we could kind of do the same thing here, right? Some code. So like create a table called people with name, which is text, age, which is an integer, and town, which is text. And we'd actually have to write the code like this. And insert into that people table the values Sally, who's 38 from Salem. I'm gonna copy that, paste. That's probably good. Charlie, who's 18 from Charlestown. And Mary, who's 28 from Marysville. So kind of the same thing we just did, except all in a code format. But it takes a while to learn that. I can hit Control Enter and run that, and if I come over here, should be save changes. There we go. Made that people table and then put the data in there. We could run queries as well. I could say select name from select the name field from people where the age field is less than or equal to 25. End of instruction. You want to run that, we get back one name. This time, I guess it was a different data set. But we can do the same thing. It would just typically be done in code, or there's a whole lot more functionality here. So there's a mess of buttons to get lost in on this. But all sorts of different sizes. I have DB on here, but we don't spend a minute on databases. So there's other ones we could look at. there's quite a bit to learn on it. Hopefully it makes sense. Access will make a really good, get you a good start. That's custom software. That's just, over the years, as I've moved from desktop applications to web applications and cloud applications, is, I just made a PowerShell, a GUI that runs PowerShell commands. Automatically runs PowerShell commands to get there. It passes, like opens Chrome from PowerShell and passes in the arguments of the website. Just put it all on buttons, all the common ones.
I was wondering what that stuff was.
Yeah.
We're learning that currently. We like learn it in the second week, and now we're working on a final project that has us doing a GUI application.
Oh yeah, GUIs are nice. This one's in Windows Forms, a really useful thing. Just a little tip is this button right here. When you're making that, you can turn that off at the end, but make sure you have a button so you can access the source code. It can be incredibly useful. But yeah, this is just a little convenient thing, and then it's got like notes and the to-do checklist and just my shortcuts are on the desktop. Let's go over to Google Docs. So for spreadsheets, which is zoomed out, reset that. So this one is one of those listed as the foundational skills. Databases are definitely a foundational skill for IT people. That's why I was going through that list a minute ago. No matter what program you're here studying IT, it somehow relates back to data because that's what we want from these machines. So this is a spreadsheet. Where can I put the zoom thumbnails? So maybe they're out of the way. So you'll notice it looks a lot like the database. There's rows and columns, lots of things. So to organize stuff, it is only text here. There's a lot we can do. You can program video games here. It can do math. It can do math and it can link to other stuff. It can show images. So there's enough to program video games. Very, very time consuming, but I know I have had a lot of fun proving to people that you can program a video game in Excel and spreadsheet. You're probably not going to do your 3D graphics, but
Probably do Doom.
Oh, so yeah.
Everything can do Doom.
yeah, I was thinking more like chess,
Yeah.
checkers. Technically, video games. Yeah, you're not going to program Assassin's Creed. You're not going to program Breath of the Wild from here. Or Breath of the Wind.
It's wild.
Wild. Okay. That sounded wrong when I said it for some reason, but yeah. You could probably do something that would closely mimic Zelda, the original Zelda, because you have cells and you could make them flow side to side. But it's all text here. So spreadsheets are really accounting software. Anybody familiar with that old paper, the accounting columnar paper? The green stuff with the columns and grids and different widths. So just like how accountants have the best paper, in a lot of ways, accountants have the best software too. So we type words in here. Let me just type my names or random word. Then type in lots of cells, organize it. There's the color changing things, right? So we can change the color, make it yellow in the background, and red text. That doesn't look very yellow in the background, maybe orangish. But we can change it, start making stuff look nice. Some common features down here in the corner is a copy thing, so you can copy stuff down. But it is like a smart copy. So if there's a pattern it can follow, like 1, 2 is probably enough for a pattern. I'll highlight all of that and then come to that lower right-hand corner. I should look at the screen in front on the laptop, not the one that's delayed a second and a half. And we drag it down and notice the pattern counted up to 10. Some patterns it knows. So like if I did Monday and use that copy thing going to the right, knows the days of the week, January, so it knows the month. Notice how what it did with the days and the months. When I spelled out the name of the day of the week, it spelled out all of them and copied that pattern. When I abbreviated it, it followed that same abbreviation. So it'll follow patterns as long as it can pick up on them. You can probably figure out a lot of the patterns it needs pretty quick.
I've seen them break. I've seen one, it's like January, February, Marchuary. It's just like, okay.
So not random. So we can do math. I guess that's where a lot of programming comes from. So equals 3 times 7. And then it's just like a calculator, except you push equals first instead of last. But we don't necessarily have to type it all in directly. Like, for example, the number 5 is already typed in here. So then it's kind of, that's where it really comes into where we're working on program stuff. If we wanted 5 plus 9, and we can refer to the cells, and then as numbers change dynamically, this equation is going to automatically update. Equals rand. So I'll just put a random number in there. A lot of pre-built functions. So I just type equal rand, and that gives basically a probability, but it lacks certainty. So 0, a number between 0 and 1. It includes 0, but not 1. So it doesn't have the 100% chance. But basically a probability, some random number. I can copy that down just to get some data. Excel is most often used. One of the most important things, as far as the foundational skills, is this is the easiest way to get charts and graphs and plots. Just highlight your numbers and insert a chart. So we looked at those numbers and decided that a line chart was the best one, but we could change that to other types. Scatter plot, area underneath of it, the pie graph, bar charts, and make really nice looking charts, customize it. Microsoft Excel has some really, really nice looking charts. They realized quickly that was what people were using Excel for the most. So they assigned a massive, massive number of programmers to go look at the charts. Notice down here it says sheet 1. So we can make multiple sheets and keep things organized. Let's see. Oh, another one with charts. I'm going to put the random thing over here again, just to get some numbers. So equals some random number. And notice I don't even have to copy it this time. It's suggesting, it's like, oh, it looks like you're trying to make a pattern here. So it's already picked up on the pattern, and just one key press fills in that pattern. But now for a chart, there's words and numbers. So when I go ask for a chart, it's probably going to predict a different type of chart. So under insert, a chart. Oh, we went to a line chart again. Well, it went to bar. I guess I went to the line chart first time, and it's like, okay, that looks like some stuff, sort of stuff that would be shown there, or a pie chart, or any of these donut chart. It's like a pie chart with the middle cut out. That's what I use it for a lot. Making things look nice. So, right, if it's going to be a table, you'd probably make your header row have some dark color, stand out a little bit more, make that big, and the rows under it a little bit smaller. Make the stuff look really, really nice. The big thing to remember is all of these cells here. A really useful one for formatting stuff. We can change the width of the column. If you just come up here where your mouse is right between them, does a lot of stuff. If you're not familiar with Excel, you're probably noticing my mouse changes every place it goes. So when the cursor looks like this, between those columns, if you double click, it'll auto fit the data in that column. That goes a long way for making things look nice. Lots of stuff. We're just getting a start on it. The biggest thing for foundational skills will be organize your data, make it look nice, add some colors and font choices so that it a very clear presentation of whatever the assignment is that some future instructor wants to take for granted that you know how to use Excel, and throw in some charts. Those are going to be the main ones. It does a lot. If you want to change the background altogether, this thing up here, the corner that doesn't really fit with anything but the labels. If you click that, it'll highlight all of the cells, so then you can change them all to like a dark background all at once. That wasn't a very good choice. That was random. That was a random color, but how do you want to do stuff like that? Okay, maybe a light blue. Oh, no. I'm just going with radio. I'm going to leave it there this time. But change the whole background at once. You didn't want the white background or just kind of randomly clicking. That copy thing is useful. Insert the chart on any of your spreadsheet applications. It's going to be under charts are going to be under a button called insert. And on your home, whatever your main place for buttons is, your main editing tools are going to have the ones for color coding stuff and making it look nice. And I can turn those background colors on or just undo. Usually, as normal, Control Z is usually the undo. But a place to organize your data and make it look nice. We can't filter it like we can with a database. We do have filtering, but it's very restricted filtering, and it happens in RAM, not in storage. So it's not as efficient of filtering. We would filter our database and then export it probably as a CSV file, and then that loads right into a spreadsheet. And then we can make it look really, really nice. That would be the typical combination of them. When we looked at word processors, we saw there's lots of extensions. What's AppSheet? I seem to have something here was, a bunch of templates here. Shift management template. Let's see what this looks like.
Bit of a complex more question. Is there a way you can import data to an Excel?
Yes.
Because I've seen like the ones I've read have like a constantly updating number. And I'm like, there's no way you just have people like constantly checking like what's updating and putting that in.
Oh, yes. You can link them together. Links work. Or something I can put. I'll put Ivy Tech here. Just type it in that cell and notice there's different versions of it. So after you enter your data and you go to it, I'll just hit Control K and link to this. It's probably along the lines of that. So we can put links in there and we can link to other data so that it's just going to flow right back in there. I was trying to think of a short answer to that. Okay. There's not.
Yes, would it work?
Yeah, it's yes. I wanted to kind of show you something that would work with it, but under the data tab, there's connectors, so we can connect to other things.
Yeah, because it was like a lot of video game stuff that have like player economies. They have like Excels that have like updating like price averages on stuff. I'm like,
so those will be coming from an RSS feed. RSS stands for really simple syndication. A good example of that would be the NASDAQ feeds. So like NASDAQ RSS feed. So they constantly send these out. It's 9-minute old data. Up to the millisecond data costs money. But 9 minutes old on the stock markets, if you're 9 minutes behind, you might as well be one of those people who only checks your portfolio once a year, once a decade. We can I'll just click commodities and it comes out like this. So it comes out in XML format, which is one of our common ways of formatting data. The two big ones, they're almost interchangeable, but when we go to process it, XML is better for strictly typed data and JSON is better for open type data. Most programming is done with Python and JavaScript in our modern world, which are both open type languages. So we see JSON a little bit more often, but it comes out like this. So we have these little tags identifying what this is. Have you ever seen HTML? Markup languages. So there's tags around here, like the data is like, here's the title, commodity speed, and then we have this extra little tag before and after it saying that's title data.
Oh, that's HTML.
This is XML, but
It's like I've
markup language is similar.
I've like opened up things that look like that, but I didn't know that was the programming language. Or similar.
Yeah, technically programming, but when we wouldn't really call it programming. We'd take a step to the subclasses, and it'd be an encoding language, not a scripting language.
Alright, no, I have a friend whose only coding language they taught him at Prosser was HTML.
You can do math in HTML. I did that in class, didn't I? Yeah. As a proof of concept, I do it at least once every time I teach the HTML class, but yeah, it's not feasible. It's possible. Any way we have to give instructions to a machine, we can technically pass any instruction that machine can accept. But that's technically, it's usually not feasible. So usually we would refer to this as any of the markup languages as an encoding language. We mark it up with extra little bits to say what it is. CNN RSS feed. So I guess I could have gone to the actual journal things, but so like world business stories. It's also in XML data. We have these tags, so the channel it is, image, so like an item here, we have a title and we add those little, we call them tags to identify what type of thing it is. A link to it and news stories coming out from CSS or from CNN on RSS feed that we can then process and add some styling into our things, or we can feed it straight into a spreadsheet. That's probably what you saw. So we can grab that stuff, the data sources, and link them together. And it doesn't have to be static, right? Where is that? So, wait. So like this cell is a calculation based off these other cells. Which cells was that based off of? Based off those two cells. So that if I go over here and change this one to a 7, that calculation automatically updates. So you get stuff like that. They're all linked together. It's connected. Do you see what I did there? So if I change that one, the calculation down here automatically updates. Oops, not that one. 6. This cell. If I change this one to 76, the calculation automatically updates.
Yeah, the ones I've looked at didn't even have graphs. That would have been nice if they did, but it was just lists of numbers.
Oh, so anytime you have a list, just highlight them and go to insert. Whoops, there. Insert.
But yeah, I know how to make a graph. I was reading ones that didn't have graphs.
Ah, yes, graphs. That's probably the most common thing for Excel, but it's lots of little things. Anytime you have something that can be broken down into lots of little bitty pieces, Excel will be the best spot for it. Right? Your essays, you probably want to run to Excel because breaking it down, that would be a letter in each cell. So that would break down too far to make sense of. Maybe a word in each cell, but then it'd be like mono spacing and would start to look strange. But if you can break it down into meaningful pieces, a bunch of individual pieces, that's when spreadsheets really shine and can make things look really, really nice. Any questions? And nice. I was hoping to finish at 8. That's like twice today. I finished the afternoon class exactly like it was like 30 seconds before the time I was looking for, and this one it was like 5 seconds afterwards. Okay, that was about 5 seconds of silence, so I assume that means there's no questions. If you have any, let me know. I'm always happy to help. There's a spreadsheet assignment. The access assignments, there's assignments on both of those. The research for your essay is due. The research project is broken down into a whole bunch of deliverables along the way. So this week you're going to go do some research and send me the research you found. Really, which is just all the steps along the way of the big project. The one afterwards, you write a rough draft or an outline or something and you go see a tutor, which the big point of that isn't necessarily the outline. This is an introduction class. So the biggest point of that is to make sure you know where the tutoring's at. Maybe you don't need writing tutoring, but there's help available. Lots and lots of help available for lots and lots of subjects. That's in the future. So spreadsheet, access, there's a discussion board, and yeah, the discussion board, I think this is the week that it's kind of wanting you to look at history. Just choose something from every decade. As technology advanced from the 40s up to now, what do you think is the most important one from each decade? If you like video games, you go back to 1950s and say the table tennis for two was built out of an oscilloscope, the first video game.
That was Pong.
Oh, that was before Pong. So Pong is based off of it. Pong, there were a couple others along the way, but Pong has everything that we have in video games. There has not been any new invention since Pong. There's been expansion and working in finer details, but there has not been invention since then.
Making a show about the creation of tech.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it yet, but it looked interesting.
So Pong would be the 70s. There was some stuff in the 60s that relates to video games. And maybe like video games, you choose the most important video game from every semester or from every decade, not semester. Mario in the 80s, because that just shot off popularity, dropped prices to affordable. Because Pong was like upper middle class at the low end. Seems so trivial today, but that was not. If we look at the price, it seems cheap today, but think of 1970s prices. That was not for. That was not something people in the middle of middle class bought. People at the upper side of middle class were stretching their budgets to buy that. It was one of those sort of purchases where the people that wanted to make sure they had bragging rights on their newest stuff is what Pong was when it first came out. Something like that. Choose the most important technology. So there's that discussion board. Hopefully some interesting things in there, and easy one to stir up debate because everybody's going to have different opinions on what's the most important. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm always happy to help. Otherwise, I will see y'all next Tuesday. And next up is something networking. I think networking or software. We'll move on to another subject. I have to look it up. I'll see y'all on Tuesday. Have a good weekend.